Hi everyone, this is Mary Boo with the North American Council on Adoptable Children, and I'd like to welcome you to a webinar today. It's presented by Advocates for Families First, which is a collaboration of NACAC, Generations United, and the National Foster Parent Association, with funding from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and Jim Casey Youth Opportunities. Our mission at Advocates for Families First is to ensure that children who can't remain with their birth parents are served in families, whether those are kinship, foster, or adoptive families. And to accomplish that goal, we have three different avenues of work that we're going to be undertaking. One is to help build the capacity of the field of organizations supporting and advocating for kinship, foster, and adoptive parents. Another is to help improve the messaging around foster care, kinship care, and adoption. And a third is to advocate for policy changes that will best serve children, youth, and these families. And this webinar is part of our capacity building efforts to help groups understand about how to raise more money and improve their financial stability. I'm delighted to have the two presenters we have today. The first is Lori Ross, who's Executive Director of the Midwest Foster Care and Adoption Association in Missouri. And the second is Phyllis Stevens, who's Executive Director of TAPLink, a parent support organization in Pennsylvania. And they have both long been affiliated with NACAC, and we are delighted to have them be here today and share their information with you. Let me just tell you one thing about this session. If you have questions today, you're in listen-only mode, so you won't be able to ask your question out loud. Instead, you'll type the question in your GoToWebinar control panel, and I will be moderating the questions and keeping an eye on them. I will, if it's something easy that I know the answer to, I'll respond to it. Otherwise, Lori and Phyllis will break periodically, and I'll be able to present your questions at that time. One question that everybody always asks is, will you have access to these slides? And actually, you already have access to them. There's a link in the email that came 1 hour before this session started. There was a link to the slides. You can download them and look at them later. Tomorrow, you'll get a link to the recorded version of this session if you want to listen to it again or share that with anyone else. So that finishes up the housekeeping, and I will turn it over to Lori and Phyllis.
Hi, this is Phyllis Stevens. Oh, go ahead, Lori. I'll let you start.
Thank you for inviting us. We are new at webinars, and so bear with Phyllis and I while we try to get this right.
Well, Lori and this is Phyllis. We'll sort of tag team the PowerPoint. I am, as Mary said, I'm Executive Director of an organization called Together as Adoptive Parents in Pennsylvania, and we're about 25 years old. So, with that, we'll get started with the first slide, which is to define your need. I think when it says, what are you fundraising for in the first place, I think that is a very, very important question. It may seem like a simple question, but it's really important because I always say, don't try to boil the ocean. You really have to be specific. And something that's very interesting statistics that I ran across was that individuals give 80% of charitable gifts. That's 80%. Foundations give 12, and corporations give 5. So we have to think about, when we think about fundraising, who is our audience? That's very interesting to know that 80% is given by individuals themselves. When we fundraise our needs, what would be the overhead cost of the need of the fundraiser? What's that hidden cost? And that's you have to really think detail about that cost. Personal cost. We just recently did a fundraiser. We did a breakfast as a fundraiser here in Pennsylvania for my organization. And we had to go down to that very smallest detail, even to think about the dishes that the dishes that the butter is going to sit on. Somebody has to pay for that. There is personal costs where the food, the bacon, whatever we were going to have, and then we had bacon, and we had beef bacon, we had pork bacon. There was all type of different situations because our group is so diverse that we had to have many different kind of things. So we had all that was personal cost, and we thought, what is it going to cost us to hold this fundraiser? So we decided to donate everything, and that's how we got around the cost of that personal cost there. So be specific. Think of your overhead costs. Think of the smallest detail. And remember, donors really asked about the administrative and fundraising costs. When donors give, they want to know where every dime is going. So when you do your budget, and we'll get into that, think about how much is going toward the actual program, your actual children. Once you identify what you have spent money on, you have the basis for your first fundraising budget. We're going to talk a little bit about a nonprofit. I know our audience is very mixed. We have administrators, we have support group leaders, we have adoptees. So most of you may already have your 501c3. The benefit of having your 501c3 is that you can really apply for those large grants. Corporations and foundations, they require that you have your nonprofit status. But for those smaller support groups that do not have your nonprofit status, you can go under like another organization, an umbrella organization, and that's what it down here where you see some organizations have parent status. You can go under an organization and they can actually fundraise. They will actually use their 501c3 to pass the money down to you. But you can also do fundraisers without having a nonprofit status, your 501c3, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. And those are for really the smaller support groups that are just getting started, who want to really raise money, perhaps to put toward getting their nonprofit status. And at the end of this slide, you'll see where it says more information is available on the nonprofit from that website there.
So this is Lori Ross, and I work with Midwest Foster Care and Adoption Association, and we're a large nonprofit organization that started out as a small parent support group located in Kansas City, Missouri. So we serve families in Missouri and Kansas, and we have grown substantially over the years from a small parent-led support group to an organization that now has over 40 employees. So we've done a lot of work on fundraising, and one of the things that I think is critical no matter what size your organization is that you really think about starting with a plan. And I tell you that now because we are an organization that did not start with a plan. We had sort of an overall plan, a brainstorming session, but we did not think through organizing ourselves with the assistance of the variety of different plans that can help make an organization successful. And going back and doing it again, we would absolutely incorporate the idea of some good, substantial, well-thought-out planning into the process, and certainly have had to do that as we've grown over the years. So the first thing we have on here is a strategic plan. And really, the Internet is a wonderful resource, and you can find all kinds of information on a variety of different ways to do strategic planning just by using Google. So strategic planning is something that is long-range and short-term. It is what you want to do 5 years from now, 2 years from now, a year from now, or even 3 months from now. Long-range things can include big plans, like you grow your vision, you want to own a building, or you want to have staff on salary who work for you, whether that's you or someone else you envision working for you down the road. Long range can also include programmatic goals of the organization. So right now you're able to do support groups, but you'd really like to be able to create regional training centers throughout your state where foster, adoptive, or kinship relative families are able to train other families who are interested in doing what they're doing. Short-term goals, on the other hand, should be goals that you're going to accomplish soon, within the next 3 to 6 months, or a year, or 2 years. All of the plans must have time-specific action steps, and it's very important as you set those out to delegate responsibility for those steps to specific people. So if, for example, you want to be able to provide training, maybe not just where you are, but in counties surrounding where you are, what are the steps that have to happen in order to make that a reality? Do you need to meet with the the administrators of your child welfare agency? Do you need to get together a pool of professionals who have expertise in certain areas? Do you need to find space that you can borrow or that you can rent for a minimal cost? Do you need to be able to advertise the availability of your training to foster, adoptive, or kinship families in the area, and how are you going to go about doing that? All of those things are sections of a plan. And when you've identified what you need to do, the next step then is to identify someone who works with you, whether that's you or another parent or someone that you know who has an interest in helping your organization grow, who will take specific pieces of that plan and make them happen. It's very important to have time frames around things so that you can make things happen in an organized way. For example, maybe the first step is that you identify the willingness of the child welfare agency to agree to allow you to provide training. And that has to happen before you take any of the other steps. And maybe the second step is you identify the location. And maybe the location determines which of your volunteer presenters you're going to work with first. So if you can put things in a timeline and identify a length of time that you're willing to wait for that to get accomplished and who's going to handle that particular task, you're going to be a lot more successful in getting your plans accomplished. Successful groups break down tasks into small, manageable steps. And this slide really covers all of the things that plans help you to accomplish. Probably the most important thing on this slide is that plans help you to identify more than one way to accomplish that goal. One of the things that is very difficult for a small organization who puts all their eggs into one basket is that a no can be a very devastating answer. When you have thought all the way through what it is that you're trying to accomplish, one no is never something that's going to derail the plan. If the local library says you can't host your event there, you have 2 or 3 other ideas of places that you can go to next to ask the same question. It's very important to stay motivated, that you don't get told no all the time, or that your no's don't derail your plan. Another kind of plan that's really important is a development plan, and probably the most important thing that I learned over time about development planning, and that means raising money, how am I going to get the money to do what I need to do, is that it has to be diverse. You can't get all of your money in one spot. Nonprofit organizations that are successful have diverse streams of funding. They have individual memberships sometimes. NACAC has an individual membership. Many foster, adoptive, and kinship parent support organizations have individual memberships that are usually relatively low cost and affordable for folks. That's one stream of income. There is also, of course, grant funding, and everyone's heard of grant funding. Phyllis talked about it briefly a minute ago. But there are other ways to create funding as well. Earned income, that would be providing a service that someone is willing to pay you for. And we struggled for a long time with that as a smaller parent organization. What did we have to offer that somebody in the community would be willing to buy? And what I have come to know over time is that there aren't a lot of people, even in the big child welfare agencies, who are experts at working with parents who are caring for abused and neglected children. They have expertise in working sometimes to remedy situations that occur in birth families and cause kids to be removed. And they have expertise in working with service providers. But there's not a lot of folks out there that offer expertise in working with foster, adoptive, and kinship families. And so that is a service that a state or a county might be willing to pay for your assistance with. One of the best places to go to get ideas of programs that you might be able to provide, you're probably providing already. For example, post-adoptive support services is to go to a NACAC conference. And I'm throwing that in because this year's NACAC conference is here in Kansas City, Missouri, and we would be very excited to host all of you at the upcoming conference this summer. NACAC conferences have been a great source of ideas for us as an organization, where we have learned about innovative and wonderful programs that serve children in foster, adoptive, kinship families, and we have met people who were more than willing to share their programs and their ideas, which have allowed us to come back to our state agency with ideas and seek and obtain state funding for some support for those programs here locally. Individual donor funding, as Phyllis mentioned, is huge. It's a very rare person who doesn't have a heart for kids who have been abused or neglected, and most of the time folks are willing to contribute at the level that they're capable of contributing, but they can't contribute to you if they don't know about you. So we're going to talk about some more planning that'll help with that. And then fundraisers are another area, and we're going to cover that at the end. One of the important things to remember about fundraisers is that you have to do a cost-benefit analysis in terms of your availability of people and time versus the amount of money that you're going to bring in for the effort. Many organizations feel like the only way that they can raise money is to do fundraisers, because they don't have access to people who have lots of money to give, or they aren't expert at writing grants. And so they, for example, we have the opportunity here in Kansas City to go work at a Chiefs game or a Royals game in one of their concession stands, and that takes about 25 people in a whole day, and we might earn $2,000 or $3,000 for that effort. And while $2,000 or $3,000 is a very helpful amount of money to earn, those same 20 people working at their normal job for the day probably would make substantially more than that, and one donor can give $2,000 or $3,000 if you just find the right person to take to lunch and ask. So evaluating the effectiveness of fundraisers sure has a lot to do with the amount of time and energy it takes versus the return on investment of time and energy.
I know that most of the larger organizations on this call have annual budget. You just have to have an annual budget. But I would encourage the smaller support group leaders to also have an annual budget. What would it cost your support group to function, to run for the next year? That needs to be written out, including salaries in there. I know that some of you are volunteer, all volunteer, or maybe have one staff or part-time staff. But as you anticipate to grow, I would encourage you to write salaries in there as well as benefits in that annual budget. I won't go over a lot about annual budget because I know that the larger organizations have one, but even for the smaller ones, I would encourage you to sit down and as Lori said, look long-term. What would you like your support group to look like a year from now or 2 years from now? And then if you write out an annual budget, you have a goal to shoot for. As you're doing your fundraising, you will have in mind, we need enough funds to do this or to do that. But it is very important that I think all organizations would have an annual budget just so they have something to reach for.
One of the things I'll add to that particular piece is that when you begin to actually get into grant writing, as your organization grows, it's important to also do program-specific budgets. So if you, for example, are providing training within the scope of your overall services that you're providing to foster and adoptive families, you're going to want to have a training budget that is a piece of your overall budget, because you'll use that training budget to seek outside funding for support. Grants can be written about specific programs within an overall budget, and being able to itemize what it is that training costs you to provide allows you then to go out and ask for a grant specific to training, and that's just one example. The other thing that I would say has been useful for us as we have grown over the years is that as we're trying to, because grant or budget writing is a guess always, is that we try to be conservative when we're predicting the income that we'll receive and liberal in terms of anticipating expenses. So things are always going to end up costing us more than we thought that they would, because things are going to come up that you're going to end up having to pay for that you didn't plan for in your budget. and you're not always going to get all of the income you hope you're going to get. I had a board member one time tell me that I needed to give him a list of all the grants we were going to request for the year, and then I needed to give him my prediction for each of those grants in terms of for sure, maybe, and not likely as to which of those grants I was planning on us getting for the next year. And I had to laugh at that request. He was new to nonprofit boards and hadn't had a lot of experience before. And say there's no way for us to do that. We have no idea which of the grants we write are going to be funded, and some of the folks who fund us every year may choose this year not to fund us, and there's no way to control for that, no way to plan for that. So when we write our budget for the year and we anticipate grant funding, we usually build in grant requests 2 times the amount of what we're hoping to receive. So if we receive 50% of the grants we ask for, then we're still in good shape. And that has been good for us. It might not be the same for other organizations, but it's been helpful for us. So it's good to remember those things as well. A marketing plan is important, and that is something that many nonprofits don't do well. A marketing plan is important because people can't give money to you unless they know about you. So marketing plans include things like your organization's name and your brand. And brand is a marketing term that basically means what your logo looks like, what feeling it is that your organization gives off in the community, what people think of when they hear your name, what your brand is, what your colors are. So many of us have organization names that are a string of letters, like NACAC, for example, or mine is MFCAA. Some of us, like Phyllis's organizations, the name is TapLink, and that probably is TapLink, I believe, Phyllis, and tell me if I'm wrong, is a combination of together as adoptive parents, and link is a word that means linking people together. So Phyllis is a sort of a combination of the two. Some organizations are words that create a meaning, like an organization in Texas that serves foster adoptive families is called Embrace. And I love that name because it sure gives you an immediate brand feeling in your head of the warmth of an embrace. But that thing, your organization's name and the brand it creates, is important in terms of a marketing plan because that's the image you project into the community. Marketing plans should include specific steps for growing recognition in a variety of different audiences. First of all, within your community of clients, which would be the foster, adoptive, kinship, relative parents, how you're going to get the word out that you exist to more people, how you're going to become the organization that they rely on. And that approach is going to be substantially different than how you reach the larger community at the bottom, the state, the nation, or even the local community, the people in your city or your town. So marketing strategies can be sending out a newsletter, hosting a website. It can be doing commentary on child abuse or neglect cases that hit the news. It can be pitching story ideas or writing letters to the editor of your local newspaper. It can be any number of things that create attention for the work that you're doing. But it's important to be organized around a marketing plan. So for example, we have a marketing plan that includes the need to have a minimum of 6 media stories annually. We need to be featured in at least 6 media stories in our Kansas City newspaper or on a TV or radio station, a minimum of 6 annually to help grow our name recognition in the Kansas City community. Making a goal like that allows us then to benchmark our progress towards that goal. If we have one, we've recently had a big article about a program that we do. We have one big article, that's awesome. And if that then spurs a couple more, that's even better. And then we move on from there, taking advantage of things like May's Foster Care Month, National Foster Care Month, is a great way to start getting some media attention in your area. And larger organizations offer packets that give you information on how to take advantage of the fact that it's National Foster Care Month to grow attention to your organization in your area. You can download those from their website.
find the right help. If you decide not to run the fundraiser yourself, then you look for a person who can, a strong leader who can run the fundraiser for you, someone that's compassionate about the mission that your organization holds, excellent organizational skills. I have a girl in our support group that she is wonderful with organizational skills. Where I'm sort of visionary and my brain is all over the place, she can bring it all together and really organize any type of fundraiser that we have. So someone's good with organizational skills, a great talent scout. I first heard that word a few weeks ago. I had heard that someone had said that Joe Kroll, the executive director of North American Council of Adoptive Children, NACAT, was a great talent scout. And that's a person that can really find a person to fit certain areas. We have a person in our organization, Jessica, who is really connected to have good connections to people. We can say, well, we need a certain item, and she can know someone who we can get that item from. So good connections. So you need someone to head up the fundraiser that is a good talent scout. They can contact and locate others that can bring their skills into the fundraising project. Someone with great communication skills, as Lori said, that can speak to the media or to the newspaper or to corporations, someone with a good communication skills, someone who's patient and persistent. I like that word persistence because as we do fundraisers and we ask for donors, sometimes people, we are maybe a corporation, they won't call back, but we have someone, it's that Marquita, she will call back until she get to actually talk to someone. So finding that right person, find someone who's patient and persistent and confident in what they're doing. If they have a confidence in them, they will portray that for others when they're asking for something. Others will pick that up and get that feeling that they want to donate because this person is very confident. Someone who's very professional in their look, in their speak, in their behavior. If you can't do the fundraising yourself, I would encourage you to find a good, strong leader that can help you do that, take that role of being a leader for your fundraiser.
The next section that we think is really important to talk about is the board of directors. Most nonprofit organizations and eventually support groups that turn into nonprofit organizations need to have a board of directors. A board of directors assures to the community that the organization is using the funds that are donated to the organization in the correct way in order to accomplish their mission. So the board of directors creates accountability for the organization and provides accountability to the public and to donors. Boards of directors should be selected because of the skills that each individual member brings, along with a passion about the organization. We've found in seeking board members for our organization that if we can find someone who has both a talent that we need, for example, right now we're looking for somebody who has talent in graphic design, and if we can find somebody who has a talent in graphic design, maybe they do that professionally, and they have some personal connection to foster care or adoption, that usually creates for us a very dedicated, passionate board member who's willing to donate using their talents that will then benefit the overall organization. It's always important to have some lawyers on your board. Most boards have more than one. It's always important to have somebody who has some expertise with financial management, accounting, those kinds of things. And there are many, many other characteristics you can think of when you start thinking about what an organization might need, that you can provide yourself with a whole array of experts who will donate their time to provide to you if you can find them and convince them to be on your board of directors. Board members should be willing to fundraise and use their personal and professional contacts on behalf of your organization. They should be supportive of the work of the leadership of the organization. The volunteer leadership or the staff of the organization should be able to count on the board to have their back to help them accomplish the work that needs to be done. But the board's role is also to hold those folks accountable for doing the work that they say they're going to do. The board should be culturally, gender, politically, racially, etc., diverse. The board needs to be diverse because the community of children and families that we serve are diverse, and because the diversity of opinions enriches the information that the board brings to the organization and allows the organization to stay current and responsive to the needs of the community. A board should always be participatory, meaning they are willing to take action. They're willing to get involved in the fundraisers that you offer. They're interested in your programming. They're willing to take action outside of board meetings on behalf of your organization. And a lot of times those actions are making phone calls to people they know who might help your organization in some way, setting up lunches, introducing you, giving you the opportunity to get to know people who can provide funds to your organization. But the board should not be micromanagerial, meaning the board does not need to get into every detail of the running of your organization. They absolutely have to hold you accountable, but they shouldn't second guess every decision that you make as you're going about the work of providing services to children and families. Micromanagerial boards are dysfunctional. Boards where folks are not participating are also dysfunctional. There is a website called Board Source that offers great tools for board development. I didn't put the link on here, but you can Google Board Source and pull up all kinds of information that helps you with board development. It's been immensely helpful to us over time. Phyllis, I'm sure you've seen it as well. Staff. If your organization is able to raise enough money that you can pay someone, that is a huge step in the right direction, because what we find in parent support organizations is that frequently they are led by volunteers. People don't have expertise in fundraising, and therefore they are only able to imagine raising the funds to cover the cost of services that they would like to provide. So say, for example, I'm a parent support group and I want to be able to make sure that everybody in my group has a fantastic Christmas holiday. And so I devote my time to bringing in donations of gifts for children, and we store them all in my garage, and that I donate my time and the time of my friends and fellow volunteers to help hand those gifts out to families in some way, shape, or form. Organizations that get larger begin to recognize that volunteers have a limited amount of time, and volunteers sometimes burn out when they work too hard. So it makes sense to pay someone for their time and make the work of supporting foster and adoptive parents an actual job. To do that, you determine what would be a reasonable salary for someone who is providing support work to foster and adoptive parents, and then you raise the money to cover that salary. We benchmark our salaries on maybe an average cost of pay for a child welfare worker in our community who has had a few years of service. And that's probably a relatively low benchmark to use, but say that's a starting level salary for someone who's going to do parent support work in our organization. And for us in the Kansas City area, that'd be somewhere in the range of $35,000 annually. So we might start saying our first salary is going to be paid to someone who does the work of supporting foster adoptive families. So we're going to plan a $35,000 salary for someone to work for our organization full time. And at that point, then our job is to raise the money to cover the cost of that person's salary. And you work your way up from that to accomplish the salaries of the other folks that you need. In our organization, we started by raising the money first, not for the program people who had been volunteering for our organization for a number of years, but for someone whose job it was to raise money. So our board made a decision that they wanted to fundraise enough money to hire someone to come in and be a development director. And that development director was the only paid staff member for 1 year. And after that 1 year, the development director had managed to raise enough money to pay all the rest of us, which at the time was 3 or 4 other people, and their own salary. And we've not ever gone backwards since that time. So it was a wise investment of about $40,000 on the part of our board in order to get that development director hired. So back to the slide, when you're at the point that you have enough money to hire staff, it's important just to select staff because they have the skills that fit the position they're needed for. Staff have to be willing to trust the leader of the organization and support the mission and vision, work in a variety of positions within the organization. So for us, as a small group with only a handful of staff, we did everything. We didn't necessarily specialize in one area or another. When there were fundraising efforts, even though we had a development director, all of us worked on the fundraising efforts. When we were providing a program of support to children during the holidays, all of us worked on that program of support to children, in addition to taking care of the other duties that we were assigned to take care of. Staff also must be positive and hopeful, not only about the organization, but also about the families and the children that we're serving. It's very important as an organization that supports foster and adoptive and kinship families that we project a hopeful future.
Volunteers. Our organization support group is smaller, and we use a lot of volunteers. How we get our volunteers is we do have an application process. We do ask for volunteers. We give them an application, and on that application is how we find out what their skills are. We ask, on that application we have what are your talents, what are you interested in, what are your special skills, do you have a writing ability, communication skills. So that's how we recruit our volunteers, is through our application process. I found out that 80% of people not volunteering say that the primary reason is because they weren't asked. Because we do use so many volunteers at TAP, we, whenever we have a training and whenever we have a any type of conference, that's how we recruit our volunteers. We ask for people who can donate 1, 2, 3 hours a week. If we believe that if we can get someone to donate 1 hour a week, that same person will donate 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and that's how we keep our organization going. With our volunteers, we are always appreciative of them. We always give out awards to them. We send thank you cards to them. We give flowers to them. We feel that we make them feel very appreciated, and we also make them. It makes them feel like they have ownership of the organization because they are very involved in the organization. We also, I like it should always be a potential fundraisers and fundraisers for the organization. Our volunteer bring other volunteers on. They hear about what we're doing, they tell someone else, and they bring other people on. Also, we use volunteers as a bookkeeper. We have a bookkeeper who does all our bookkeeping, our volunteer work. We have even gotten our a CPA to provide pro bono services for us, for our organization. I would encourage, if you're using your volunteers, just to know your support group, know your members, know who you're asking to volunteer. I would encourage you not to ask someone that is very shy and maybe introvert to do something that would put them up front or to lead in a certain fundraiser, because that's not their talent. Because our organization, our volunteer, it's a small. We're small enough for us to know, for me to know, each one of our members, and where I need a person to volunteer, I kind of know their personality, so that I can ask them to be involved in something that will fit their personality, and so they won't feel out of their league or something that they cannot do. Volunteers can also staff events. You can use them in many ways. I use them as our, we have a conference every year. Our conference is run by all volunteers. Volunteers as our registration, volunteers as our facilitators. You can use them in staff events. You can use them to stuff envelopes. When we send out our mailing, we have a contract with Department of Human Services, and when we do a mailing, that is about 4,000 pieces of mail that we get out, and we do that once, maybe twice a year. I use all the volunteers that I can get, even the volunteer sisters, brothers, to get all that mail. So stuffing envelopes. Also soliciting donations as they go about their business in the community. One of our members of TAP has asked us if they could put a donation box in their company, and their company has given them permission to put a donation box up. So that, something that she thought of on her own. They have a donation box, and that's the income that comes into us. A volunteer has done that for us, to write emails, use websites, assist. So I would encourage you, for those who are smaller and do not have paid staff at the moment, the reason people do not volunteer is because they're never asked. I would seek volunteers by asking, and also by making them feel very appreciative.
Okay. So that's more on the volunteer stuff. Should we go back to that for just a second?
No, I just covered that one.
Okay. So one more slide, and then we're going to take a break and answer some questions. One of the things that you can do if you are in need of more assistance, say you're in a medium position where you have a couple of employees and you're in need of more assistance but you can't afford to hire an employee, is that you can use something called contract help, which means that you write a short-term contract for a specific service that you're going to pay someone to help you with. But you're not going to hire them as a full-time employee, which allows you then to need to provide a salary and benefits. A contract help is paid, so therefore you have the accountability with that person that you don't necessarily have with volunteers, meaning they're getting paid for a job, so they have to follow through and do the job, while volunteers can decide at any point that they're not interested in volunteering anymore, and there's not a way to hold them accountable for that. Contract help can also be helpful when the cost-benefit ratio makes sense, and they can provide services that fill deficiencies in the staff for the short term or the long term. There are many organizations that use contract help to assist. Say they've identified a large grant that they want to apply for, and they are not confident that their skills are to the level necessary to apply for that grant. They may hire someone who is a grant writer to come in and write that specific grant for them. So it's limited to one grant. They pay a certain amount of money, and they improve their chances of accessing the funds from that grant substantially. Another way contract help can assist small nonprofits is that you can contract assistance for services that are office management type functions. You can contract help to help you with bookkeeping. You can contract help to help you with payroll. There are lots of ways that contract help can be used if you can't afford full-time help. So at this point, I think we'll stop and ask Mary to follow up with any questions that we might have received.
Great. Thank you both so much. I'll just say again, if anybody has questions they'd like to add, they can go ahead and type them in the box. I do have a couple. First is back to sort of the development plan and the strategic planning related to fundraising. How often do you revisit that plan? Is it something you do annually or more frequently? Just how often do you get back in touch with that plan and see where you're at?
In my organization, those are plans that are revisited annually. Our budget, our annual budget, is due to our board of directors in October. So right prior to our budget planning, we do our development planning, our marketing planning, and we revisit our strategic plan, which is usually a 3 to 5 year strategic plan to do an analysis of what we've been able to accomplish. So that, for example, if we've accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years within 2 years, we can then go back to the board and say we need to do a new strategic plan because we've accomplished these things and we need to go forward, or we need to carry this item forward a little bit longer because we haven't accomplished it yet. So for us, it's most of those plans are done annually. Phyllis?
I think we've only done maybe 2 strategic plan, and we have revisited them every 2-3 years.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is sort of a couple questions related to volunteers. Um, and one, Phyllis, I know the slide said volunteers should rarely be the clients the organization strives to serve, but most of the support groups and foster parent associations are run by volunteers who are foster parents. So how do you balance that with the people who are most engaged are the clients?
Well, it's a balance because I think it works because we all have that same passion. As we meet together as a support group, we're supporting each other. So therefore, that compassion and that I guess wanting to help just natural. How can I explain that? It just naturally easier, I think, to become a volunteer, even though all of our volunteers are adoptive parents, foster parents, or kinship parents. They want to volunteer because they want to fundraise, because they're very invested in TAP, want to see TAP go forth, and because a lot of the fundraising that they do, it goes right back to their family as well as other families. So it balances itself out because they see, I think they can physically see the results of where that fundraising money is going. They see the benefits, they see the activities, they see the trips, they see whatever we're fundraising for. A certain speaker, they may want a speaker that they want to bring in to speak at a conference. They can actually see where that money is going, so they don't mind fundraising, even though they are the clients.
And for us, we have a different approach. We do have lots of volunteers who are foster, adoptive, and kinship families in some of our programs. But the problem that we've had with having the large percentage of our volunteers be foster adoptive parents is that there are limits to what they can do. There are limits to their time availability. There are limits to their resources, and usually they are investing most of their discretionary money right back into the children within their homes. So they typically are supporting, supplementing the state's reimbursement rate by a substantial chunk of their own family's income. They're focused on kids who have substantial special needs, and they don't have necessarily the resources or the time or the connections, because they're so busy doing the work, that they can provide assistance to the level necessary to grow the organization's fundraising. So what we've found is that absolutely those folks are welcome, and they volunteer in the ways that they can without becoming burned out. But as our organization has grown, it has been very helpful to be able to engage volunteers who are outside of our community of foster and adoptive parents, usually starting with people who know those families, people who have some connection to those families, and moving from them out into the community to their friends and other people who then hear about the amazing work that's going on in our foster and adoptive families. And once we get into the community to people who do not have foster, adoptive, and kinship children into their homes, they actually have discretionary income again, and they might have connections with folks who can provide services that help to grow our ability to connect to funders in the community. So it has been important for us to do a whole lot of both. We certainly started where all of our volunteers were foster adoptive parents, and then realized that it was important to be able to engage folks who were not as well.
Great. I think that segued into my next and at the moment final question, unless, oh no, sorry, there's one after this, which is how do you find those volunteers? But you primarily found them through your clients. Are there ways other than through the foster, adoptive, and kinship families you serve that you found very successful at getting volunteers?
Well, we've gotten volunteers from colleges as well. So we've put, they've allowed us to put announcements on our bulletin board, on their bulletin boards at the community college here in Montgomery County. So we've gotten volunteers through that. We've gotten volunteers through, like Lori said, from our families perhaps a sister or a brother or someone else has come in to help our volunteers. I recruit from my trainings. That's where I recruit my volunteers from. I hold 6 trainings a year, and between 60, 70 people come to each training. And I recruit volunteers from the trainings and from our conference that we hold every year. I recruit volunteers there. So I use for our trainings and our conference, we have new people come in. It all depends upon what a topic is, brings in different sets of people, and that's how I keep my volunteer pool large. It's just through my trainings and my conferences.
Similarly, we have used volunteers from colleges, schools of social work, psychology, early childhood education. There are lots of groups of students who need to have some volunteer hours or become even practicums, part of their education, can volunteer large chunks of time working with you. There are volunteer groups in the community, sometimes within businesses, sometimes just organized as volunteer groups. There's a group here in a suburb of Kansas City called Lee Summit that is just strictly a volunteering group, and we connected with them by filling out an application to be an organization that receives some services for them. Companies often have volunteer days where they will go out into the community and do a project. So basically just getting your name on those lists and letting folks know that you could use the assistance with volunteers. And once folks come out once and have good experience with you, get to interact with a few kids and families and feel good about what they're doing, then they pass the word along to other people.
Great. And so it sounds like you get people involved in the program work and seeing the kids, and then they get even more engaged. So you don't
Absolutely.
Start with fundraising, let them see what the difference they're making first.
Right.
Okay, I have 2 other questions, and then we'll move on. One, I think you may have answered, but somebody's asking about getting people who are not foster adoptive kinship parents involved at the board level. And so, to that, making that commitment to being on the board. And do you have any different advice about that? Or if it's the same techniques as with other volunteers?
No, it's definitely different. When you're hunting for someone who is a board member, either they fall into your lap because they hear about you and have an interest in what you're doing and grow from maybe a position where they've donated to they become more involved in your events and they eventually let you know that they have an interest in serving on your board, or you go hunt them down because they have something that you need. And you hear a rumor that they might have an interest in children's issues. And typically, it is all about who you know. So the best way to recruit a board member is to find someone who knows that person you're targeting and ask that person to set up a lunch or a meeting where you can share information about what you're doing, and ask that person then to consider whether they would be willing to get involved with your organization, either on a committee of the board or actually just ask them to be on the board. People are very honored to be asked to serve on a board of directors. It's also important, though, before you go hunt someone up, that you get them vetted a little bit as well. You want to know in advance if you're bringing a problem onto your board. So the application process for board members is a helpful thing, along with a little bit of screening to make sure that you are getting folks who are not going to disrupt the flow of things, but in fact add benefit to the board membership. We have several members of our board who don't have any direct connection to foster care and adoption, but they are part of wealthy, long-time families in the community, and they care about kids. And so we got to them through someone who knew them and told them the story and won them over, and they've been very dedicated board members.
And I, too, sort of go hunting for our board members. Most of our board members are either adoptees, foster parents, or kinship parents. And we have adoptive families on that, too. But we have a couple that are not. We have a financial advisor, and because his expertise, we have him on the board. So we are looking for others. We have a caseworker on the board, MSW on the board, and that help us kind of maneuver through a lot of the child welfare things. So we also kind of go hunting for our board members.
Okay. I have one other question, which I don't know if you'll be able to answer right now or if we can follow up, but somebody's asking if you have any sample grant proposals or samples of grant writing that a support group might be able to use and learn from.
Sure, I'm sure Phyllis and I both have some, and we'd probably have a few we'd be happy to share.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, sorry, let me just get one more question and then we'll move on. And do you have a sample board matrix document? Somebody's asking, and I'll say that we have one. Kim shared one on a previous webinar, so I can share that with folks. But I don't, Lori and Phyllis, do you have a document you use to look at the skills and the diversity of your board?
I'm guessing that my board chair has that document. I don't have it in-house, so Kim's would probably be the best one to share.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we're both on this one, Phyllis. One of the things that we want you to know is very important in terms of your work in fundraising is keeping track of what you do. People give you money so that you can go do good things. And it's very important that you not only keep track of what you do with their money, but also keep track of what you're accomplishing, the good stuff you're doing. And one of the things that small groups that are first organized have trouble doing is keeping track of what it is they are doing and how they're doing it, and then reporting back to people how the money was invested and what were the outcomes that were achieved. So, basic things like buying files in a file cabinet and keeping logs of your phone calls and who you communicate with, doing agendas for meetings and taking minutes of meetings, keeping track of the letters and the articles that you write and that go in the paper. Those things are critically important and oftentimes things that people aren't too concerned about doing. Receipts for donations is huge. Phyllis,
and that's
you
what I
talked
was
about
going to share with receipts for donation, keeping track of those and sending, thank you notes behind those receipts. We keep receipts of everything. Any check that we receive from a donor or from our membership fees, or any check that we receive, we make copies of those receipts. It's so easy to, if someone slip and don't make a recording or don't keep a log or whatever, we can go back and see who that donation was sent from, the name, the check, and everything. So we keep logs of even the checks that we come in, the phone calls that we receive. We have a tablet that it's a form that all the phone calls that come in. And then keeping track is good also for when you're writing articles, like Lori said, for newspapers, or you need someone, they ask you statistics. If you're asking a donor, they say, well, how many calls do you receive? Or you're doing some type of report, the importance of keeping track of all your information. I still have the file cabinet. I haven't got onto Excel yet or QuickBooks, but I still have that file cabinet and that phone log. But we try as best we can to keep track of all communication for various reasons.
So in terms of databases for tracking services, there are lots of different ways to do that. There are very expensive programs you can use. We have a community link program here in the Kansas City area that has web-based access to online database to manage our client contact and the services we provide that we use for some of our programs. We use something connected to the state and their child welfare reporting system for some of our other programs. But it can be done in something as simple as Excel, and every Microsoft Office program that you buy has Excel as a part of the package. Excel is a great way to create spreadsheets and just track information. You can be creative with that, but it's just important to do the work of tracking the information. Financial management software is very helpful. Many organizations just do, pencil and paper, and that's fine until it starts to get a little more complicated. QuickBooks is widely used by nonprofits. When we started, we did QuickBooks, just regular QuickBooks. and then we transitioned over to QuickBooks for nonprofits. It's a very helpful way to keep track of your various budgets and all of the little pieces that impact money that comes in, money that goes out. It's also important to have a database to manage the information you get about your donors. Again, that can be done in Excel or something as simple as that, or you can certainly move into substantially more expensive programs that have lots of great features like Raiser's Edge, and I can't remember. There's a few others as well that are very well respected.
You can also use low-cost ways to stay in touch with your donors. Social media, Facebook, TAP has the Facebook page, Twitter. You can use all those social media to keep in touch with your donors and to keep in touch also with your parent group and your families as well. I think one of the most important things that is on the slide in front of you, post your group accomplishments on all the forums and ask people to share their good ideas to friends. Individual donors are created by letting people know about the good work that you are doing. And that's the value of Facebook and Twitter and social media, is you can share what you have done to a wide audience for very, very small amount of money. And the feedback from that can be very tremendous for very small cost.
Foster parents have a tendency to be quiet heroes and not to brag about their accomplishments. And so when foster parents or adoptive parents or kinship parents have created a group to support themselves, the last thing on their mind is bragging about the accomplishments they have. And that is the most important thing they can do in terms of raising awareness within the community. So you need to become comfortable at tooting your own horn. And these ways allow you the opportunity to do that on a real easy and regular basis. So local resources, and I just wanted to touch on this, and you're going to have to use your Google to find the ones that exist in your community, because these have been very helpful to us as we've grown here at Midwest Foster Care. Philanthropy organizations exist in most major metropolitan areas. Ours is Kansas City Council on Philanthropy. There are probably lots of others, and if you just Google the word philanthropy in your largest city nearby, you'll probably find that there are organizations that collect information for all other nonprofits. There are also organizations that collect information from foundations in your area. So it's important to find those philanthropy organizations and connect with them. They list the foundations. They also list grant recipients. They provide training on nonprofit management that's usually cheap or free. They also offer salary surveys and other tools for nonprofit managers when you're just starting to create a stream of funding for employees. A salary survey that compares your organization to other nonprofits in your area is a great way to identify how much you're going to want to pay people so that you can plan your first budget. Those salary surveys are usually updated every few years, so they take a look at, based on an organization whose annual budget is $500,000, how much do you pay an executive director? How much do you pay a fundraising person? How much do you pay a program person? And it gives you a great place to start in looking at what is an appropriate salary amount, because when you start to hire people, you want to be competitive. You want to be in the same range as they might get from another nonprofit somewhere else. Grant writers and reviewers can be absolutely located through philanthropy organizations. They often post their services or their availability on job sites in philanthropy organization websites. You can also contact well-known local funders for recommendations. For example, we have Hallmark in the Kansas City area. I can certainly call the Hallmark Foundation and ask them if they're aware of any grant writers who they would recommend to someone who needed to contract with a grant writer. And they are happy to provide me with the names of some people who they feel like are good grant writers and their contact information. It's always good to vet somebody by hearing from the folks who are reading the grants and awarding the money, who they think does the best job of making the case. The universities also offer grant writing courses, and oftentimes those courses are taught by instructors who have served as grant writers, and you can contract with those folks to write or to review grants that you're writing at a relatively low cost compared to the amount of dollars that you get back from grants that are funded. Nonprofit bookkeeping services exist in many places. We have a service in Kansas City called Support Kansas City. They are a nonprofit themselves, and what they do is provide back-of-the-house bookkeeping and other support administrative services for nonprofits that aren't big enough yet to hire people to do that work internal to their organization. In our organization, we worked with those people to do our bookkeeping and also to track our donor database for probably 5 or 6 years. Those organizations can typically connect you with a foundation in your community or more than one foundation who likes to fund capacity building grants to smaller groups to pay for their services. So for example, we connected with Support Kansas City and wanted to use them but didn't have money to pay them many years ago, and they said to us, the Hall Family Foundation likes to pay for us to work with small nonprofits. So we approached Hall Family Foundation, and Hall Family Foundation gave us a $15,000 grant to pay Support Kansas City to work with us, and that helped us substantially with growth. Those things are available in many, many large cities and are available just by Googling and looking for them. Audit firms and insurance providers are something you need to think about if you start raising a decent amount of money. You have to have an audit annually if you're going to be asking for substantial grants. Most folks will give a smaller grant, and by smaller grant I mean like up to a few $1,000s to organizations that are nonprofits, whether they do annual audits or not. But when you start getting grants that are in the double digits or higher, 10,000 or 20,000 or even in the hundreds of thousands, there is an expectation that nonprofits receive an annual audit. And audits can be somewhere between $4,000 and $10,000, typically maybe a little bit more than that depending on the size of your organization annually, which is a great big chunk out of a relatively small budget when you first get started. But it's important to plan that in because the audit is not only a tool that provides evidence to fundraisers that you're a safe investment of their money, but the information you get from your audits helps you design your financial management system internally so that there in the future are no questions about how you spend your money, that you create practices in terms of how your money comes in, how you deposit it, how you spend your money, that allow you to be transparent and accountable to anybody who might look. Insurance providers for nonprofits are also available in most metropolitan areas. Typically, there are 1 or 2 underwriters nationally who are the carriers of the insurance, but there are usually organizations in each city that offer insurance to nonprofit organizations, and you have to think about a variety of kinds of insurance when you're a nonprofit, from professional liability to directors and officers insurance that will allow folks to join your board without the fear that they're going to be held financially accountable for something you might do wrong. Again, those policies are relatively affordable. When you're small, they become more expensive as you get bigger, but they're necessary to get really high-quality board members to agree to participate in assisting your organization to grow. Raising your relevance definitely leads to raising money. You as a leader in your organization have to make the right connections. It's your job to be the face and the voice and the connection to the issue that you're working to resolve within your community. So the ways that I encourage people to do that are to volunteer on boards and task forces that exist in your community. You have to grow your credibility so that people come to you when they have questions or they think of you when the issue comes up. You should use some of your time to participate in boards and task forces that address the issues you care about, and even boards and task forces that are connected to the issues you care about. So if you're a foster or adoptive parent and there's a board or task force related to child abuse prevention, that might be something you want to get connected to because it is connected to the issue you care about. And then when you get into those boards and task forces, whether you're there as a visitor or whether they appoint you as a member of those boards, you should definitely speak up and make a name for yourself on the issues that matter. We have a tendency to sit back and listen because we feel like everyone in the room might be more of an expert than we are, when in reality the fact that you live with these children and you experience things directly makes you a frontline connector to the issue of the children that the folks at the table are there to talk about. So your information is possibly more valuable to them than the information of the psychologist at the table or the attorney at the table who doesn't live it, breathe it, wake up with it every single day.
Get to know your legislators. I would encourage you to know your state rep, know your state senators, meet them. As soon as we have a new election, I'm in their office. I introduce myself, I introduce my organization, let them know what we're about. They often invite me to have exhibits at their expo, or if they're having an event, they'll invite together as a adoptive parent to become part of their event. We even ask them for fundings. We've gotten $5,000 from state senators. We've gotten $10,000 from state senators. So it is real important to know your legislators, but not only for funding, but also if there's something that you want your legislator to support, a bill that's going through or need to be sponsored. And what I found out by getting to know my legislators is a lot of time that a resource family will call the legislators and they will give them, together as adoptive parents, information to help them with their need. And that's a plus because now the legislator knows that we are a resource for him. And he's also a resource for us. So I've even taken a train to Washington to meet with the people at Casey's office, our federal state reps, senators as well. So it's important to get to know your legislators. Become a public spokesperson. When there's a media opportunity, when there's something, especially May for Foster Care Month, in November for National Adoption Month, offer comments on news articles. And this is really to get your name out there. And it's something that Lori said that it's really true, is that a lot of us as resource families, we do a lot, but we don't want to share all that we've done. But by getting our name out there, it gives us more recognition, which gives us more could give us more funding to broaden what we do for children. So write letters to the editor, apply for awards so that you can gain recognition in communities. Here in the Philadelphia area, we have the 76ers Hero. That's an award you can apply for here. I've applied for it a couple times, and then you go out in the middle of the basketball court and everything, but the purpose of it is really to get your name out there. So apply for awards for yourself. Sometimes there's awards that offer, you can self-nominate. I would encourage you to do that. Become a spokesman for your organization. Develop the language. I call it the elevator speech. It's basic. Know your statistics. If someone's going to ask you a question, how many people, how many children are in foster care? Know those answers. I know in Pennsylvania we have 14,000 children in foster care. We have a goal of 3,000 for adoption. We have about 1,300 with no identified resources. So know that statistic. So when you're talking to someone and they ask you those questions, I would encourage you to know the answer to those questions. That elevator speech, when you're talking about the need of your group, know what that need is, why you need it, short statement. How will it help the community you serve? How will it help the families that you serve? And how much of a cost it will cost you. So just have that, I call it the elevator speech, just have that ready.
It's always helpful to be able to have about 3 minutes worth of information that if you're trapped in an elevator with someone who can make a decision, you can make the case. Most people in positions of a lot of responsibility don't want to give you a lot of time. 3 minutes is a good amount. A one-pager is another term that we use. Put your information into one page. Don't do a 36-slide presentation. Do it in one page.
Communication. I think one of the best communication is a website, and probably most of you have websites, but I would encourage those that do not have website to develop a website. It's a good way to get your information out there so that a wide variety of people can see it. Even before you have physical location, you can have a website. Before you even have your start your support group or have your first meeting, you can develop a website. Be sure to invest enough resources to make your website attractive, useful. Our website is called TapLink, and it's for families that have already adopted families. It's for resource families, for foster families, adoptive families. Invest at e-commerce so that you can accept donations online, send business emails from an email address connected to your organization, update your website regularly. And that's updated on appearance as well. We've just recently updated ours. We put more information out there. So that's a good, relatively inexpensive way to get your name out there and keep that communication going is through a website. Invest visibly. We talked about, Lori talked about this a little bit. It's branding. That was one of the first things that we did Together as Adoptive Parents, is that we got our business cards and we got a logo, and we have we found a great color for us, and we branded us. So whenever anyone here in Pennsylvania see our logo, see our color, they automatically connect it with Together as Adoptive Parents. Produce a newsletter. We've been producing newsletters for years. Newsletters do many things. They not only keep your group informed on what's going on, but it also keeps the community up to date on what's happening in your group. We put our newsletters in libraries. We put our newsletters in doctor's office, so that we try to put our newsletters around where we know that resource parents will be or have some contact with, so that they can it can be there for them to see. Also, there's another version that you can use if you have families that are on the internet, is the instant contact. You can use that also for your newsletters. For our group, Together as Adoptive Parents, we have families that do not have access to the web, so we have to use paper newsletters as well as the internet for to send out our newsletters.
And we do the same. We certainly do constant contact for emails. We also use constant contact to do instant alerts if we have information that we need to get out quickly. For example, if we're spearheading an advocacy effort and we need foster and adoptive or relative families to make phone calls for us or reach out to their friends or neighbors, we can send that out immediately to those folks who have email access. But we certainly print newsletters and mail those out as well, because we don't want to eliminate the ability to communicate with anybody. So it's a combination, I think, for both of our organizations. People give to you because you touch their hearts. They give to you because they care about what it is that you're doing. So we have to strategically communicate with donors. We have to honor them in print. One of the biggest no-nos of all time is to put a list of your donors in a newsletter, a big thank you to your donors in a newsletter, and leave people off. That is a horrible thing to do. We've all done it. It's just an awful experience. You want to make sure you honor them in print. So it's nice to highlight specific donors occasionally who've done something really remarkable for you, a real big gift or a gift that has a special meaning. It's also important to highlight special volunteers. Anytime you honor someone in some way, all of the people who love and care about that person also appreciate your organization for what you've done to make them feel special. It's important to tell stories of clients that you've served or outcomes that you've achieved as often as you possibly can. The point of that is that you are producing a feel-good for the reader, for the watcher, for the person who has the opportunity to observe what you're doing, and that again touches their hearts. And then probably the most important thing on this page is that it's important to focus on children in all of your communications. Although we all know that families are the place in which children heal and thrive, children have to be the focus of that message. Children are the people who cause folks to want to help. What we're doing is to impact children. So even when we are providing direct supports to families, we're directing support to families so that they can devote their resources to helping children. It's always important to continue to come back to children. In social media, it is helpful to develop a plan for frequent communication. If you have an opportunity to go to social media training, they will talk to you about when people actually look at things like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, what kinds of things get retweeted, what kinds of things grab their interest, and you can develop a plan, and there are tools out there that allow you the opportunity to schedule in advance posts to go out for a stretch of time. But coming up with a plan for that is really important. It seems silly to go to all the effort to create, for example, a Facebook page for your organization and then never update it with the things that you're doing. Every time you update a post on your organization's Facebook page with whatever is happening around the organization today, that shows up in the news feeds of everyone who's liked your page. And again, you're in their mind for that minute while they're reading that. That's critically important. Ask your clients and your contacts to share information on your organization via their social network pages. It couldn't be any easier to do that, so it's perfectly appropriate for you to say, will you please share this, and many will. Post positive stories regularly. You probably want to post 2 or 3 positive stories for every post where you ask for something. You want to tell them what the work you're doing is helping children to do or making a difference for this particular person or this family. And you definitely want to offer updates on your current events or post inspirational stories regularly. Finding the money, your board is going to get you connected with money people, no doubt about that. And people who give you money will get you connected with other money people. It's very important for you, and it's intimidating. From personal experience, it's very intimidating to make personal visits to foundations or philanthropists. But when you're going in there with someone who you know, a board member or a donor that you've already got an established relationship with, and they know the person you're going to visit, it's substantially easier. They start the conversation, they line it up for you to give your conversation about what it is your organization does, and you leave the meeting with new friends. It's very important to make those personal visits because those personal visits often result in well, you might fit into this category of ask for us, why don't you give us a call? You have a program idea, you can talk to our foundation manager, and she'll look over any requests you send in. It is who you know that allows you to connect with the organizations that provide you with the money. I would say go to lunch with anybody who might help or who might know someone who can help and tell your story. So if someone who has some connections in the community says, I have a friend I'd like for you to go to lunch with, don't be too busy. Go to lunch, share your story, because you never know who that friend might be. I keep going back to the Hall family and the Hallmark connection because that's a big funder in our community. Someone I knew, a pediatric doctor that I knew that I had asked to be on our board of directors, said, I have a friend I want you to go to lunch with. She and I met for lunch with her friend who happened to be a member of the Hall family, and that has been immensely beneficial to us in the long run. That person who was a member of that family was friendly, nice. I had no idea who she was initially, and I told her the story of our organization, and she has been a complete supporter ever since then, and her foundation's money, her business's money, and her family's money have been available to us since that time. Always have an ask ready for the meetings. whether that's we'd love to have some more of your time. Can I talk to you about resources that you might know about? Do you know anyone who could help us with this particular issue? Or a donation ask. I'm looking for $10,000 to sponsor people to come to the NACAC conference. Anything along those lines, be ready to respond with an ask. There it is.
Grants. Apply for grants. This is where your 501c3 comes in. If you are a nonprofit, no grant is too small, no grant is too large. Apply for grants. Select businesses and foundations. And I agree with Lori. If you can get in to see someone at the foundation, go. That is how we got 2 of our large grants. It's one of our board members, the financial person on our board of directors. He had a contact with one of the foundations here in Pennsylvania. Took me in to meet her, and it was through that we got a pretty large grant. So if you can get in to see someone at that foundation, I would encourage you to do that. Select businesses, foundations to write grants from that have interested in children and youth, and that's very important. If they have an interest in children and youth, if they do not, I wouldn't waste your time writing grants for to them. Follow the guidelines. Most guidelines are on the web now. It's much easier to get those guidelines now than it was a few years back. If you're writing to a company, if you're writing to a foundation, the guidelines usually are on the web. And also who they funded is also on the web. You can find that information out as well. When you're writing a grant, just be sure to have it proofread. Have it proofread by someone that is not really familiar with your requesting the money for. That way, if they understand, then more than likely the funder will understand as well.
So this section is for those of you that have moved on and you're getting pretty decent at doing grants, and you've gotten a good number of individual donors interested in what you're doing, and now you're ready to seek opportunities for earned income through government funding. So what I would say to that is that services in the state or services in the county are contracted out. Most of that information is available on State Office of Administration, Department of Administration, something that sounds like that, websites. You can register as a potential vendor on an Office of Administration website, and that will allow you the opportunity to be told when the state or the county is looking to issue a request for proposals for a service that they're willing to pay for. You can see what the contracts are that exist currently, how they're written, what they've selected to fund. You can get copies of all of that because that's public information. So it's important to do some research and figure out what services are contracted out. And if something is not going to be rebid sometime soon, most state or county services are effective for a period of 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and then they have to issue a new bid for the service so that things are fair and competitive. And if there's a big gap between the time you start looking and the time a service that you might be able to contribute to is going to be rebid, then you can figure out which of the contractors holds that contract and contact them to see if you can subcontract to provide some of that services with someone who is already doing the work that your work would enhance. It's also important to follow your legislature's budget process. One of the first things that I did that was really overwhelming as we started to grow this organization was to request a copy of the state budget for the Department of Social Services, and then specifically for the Children's Division in Missouri. And I went through that budget line by line to see where the money was spent, how they allocated money from the federal government into the state, and then from the state into the services that were provided, so that I would have an understanding of where the money comes from and where it goes. And once you can figure that out and then watch the budget process within the legislature, you begin to understand how you can impact where state dollars are allocated. That is a high-level process and not something that people get good at immediately, but it certainly is helpful for you so that you're in the know with regard to where people are getting their money. You should also look for ways to earn income. One of the things that is important to do, and we have found to be very effective, is to try to stay ahead of the curve, and I talked about this briefly before. Look at what is new nationally. Look for programs that are exciting, that are creating results, that have good outcomes nationally, things that you're reading about, things that you're hearing about, and then see if you can find a way to bring some piece of that back to your local county or state and be the person who wants to provide that service. One of the things that I've found, and I've said on the slide, NACAC conferences are a great place to look, is that if somebody's doing something remarkable and they're at NACAC presenting about it, and you ask them for more information, they're always willing to share more information. They'll tell you how they did it. They'll share the information with you so that you can come back and try to do that in your area. People who care about children also care about helping children who are far beyond the area where they can personally provide services. So they're usually very generous with their information, and they'll help you to avoid any pitfalls that they might have had along the way. Also look for gaps in service provision in your area and respond to those gaps rather than immediately competing with established organizations for a limited stream of funding. We've recently started to work in the state of Kansas, and as we've looked at the state of Kansas, there are many things that are already pretty well taken care of in Kansas. But we noticed that there are few post-adoptive services provided, and we noticed that there is very limited individual advocacy on behalf of families in Kansas. So as we move into Kansas, those are the two areas where we're going to devote our time and our resources to filling a gap that exists. We don't want to go in immediately and try and take limited pools of funding away from organizations that already have it. We're going to look for a way that we can provide services that supplement rather than compete for the services that already exist. So fundraisers. Fundraisers are, in my opinion, as much about fundraising as they are about fundraising. Fundraisers can be very large amounts of money. Like we have some organizations in Kansas City who do big gala dinners who bring in $600,000 or $700,000 in one evening, and that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal in terms of the amount of money raised. It's also phenomenal in terms of the amount of people who get to hear about the organization. But it takes a while to get a fundraiser to that level. So for us, and we're certainly not at that level yet, we use fundraisers as much for fundraising as we do for fundraising. So if we're going to do an event, our goal is to raise some money, enough to cover the costs and substantially more if we can make it that way, but also an event that allows us to connect with members of the public and share information about what we're doing. So we pick projects which we view as a good investment. We don't take on more than we can comfortably handle. We use our board, our volunteers, our friends and families to solicit ideas and staffing help for the fundraiser, and we look for donors specifically to cover the costs associated with the fundraiser so that when you get to hosting the fundraiser, all of the profit is profit. We don't eat it up in terms of paying for the place or for whatever it is that is being done. If we want to bring in somebody to do entertainment, we've got someone who sponsors the cost of the entertainer so that that doesn't have to come out of our bottom line. The other important thing to say in fundraising is you need to ask people for money. You just have to ask them. Some people see that as the very hardest thing to do, and yet it accounts for the largest percentage of nonprofit funding, like Phyllis said. Asking people for money is the way you get money. It's the most cost-effective type of fundraising. It's very easy to do. You put together a little packet of information about your organization. You meet with people one-on-one, tell them what you do, how you do it, and why it matters, and then you ask them for a donation. And they give you a donation. 9 times out of 10, they say yes. They give you a donation. It's shocking, I'm telling you, but it works. So one of the things that's important to do is to get over the fear of asking. I think many of us hesitate to ask because we feel like we're asking for ourselves. If you can reframe the way you think about that in your mind and recognize that you're not asking them to give you money, you're asking for them to use their money to make a difference for children. you're asking them to give money to children who've been abused and neglected. It's a whole different approach to the ask and a whole lot less guilt personally for asking someone to give you their money. So we were going to break, and I think we might be over time, Mary. I don't know.
We are, but I'd say I'm just going to, and if anyone has any questions, ask them. I'm just going to ask one, which is a really big question in some ways, but how do you know, there are a lot of ideas you all have talked about, and there are more ideas still to come. How do you pick your priorities? You know, is it different for different organizations based on their level of development, or just, anyway, so that's sort of, you know, you talk about website, you talk about board, you talk about, anyway, we've talked about a lot of things, but if an organization is trying to grow in this area, are there a couple places you all would recommend that they start?
I would say that establishing a web presence is an important place to start, along with developing a board of people who have some ability to connect you with other people who can help. Those are two areas that I think we leave out. I think most of us start providing services first because we're parent-to-parent support groups, and we start by providing services first. So that's sort of a given, that's happening, and then you realize you can do more if you take some of the steps that we've talked about today. I think the places that I would start would be with communication and your appearance, which can be taken care of pretty easily with a web presence. And then in terms of investing some time in creating an effective board. Those things can be huge in terms of encouraging the organization's growth. Phyllis, what are your thoughts?
Also start with small fundraisers, and we'll go through those pretty quickly at the end. Small fundraisers for a purpose. That money would be used to get your nonprofit status, because that's where your you're going to get your large amounts of money from. So I would also start with just small fundraisers, which we're going to cover, and that will get you at least a pot of money to get your nonprofit to be able to look for larger grants.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Having that 501c3 is critically important. So if you're not at the place where you've got that, finding the money that's necessary to get that is critically important.
Great. We don't have
Mary,
any.
Did you have any more?
We don't have any others right now, so I'd say keep on.
Okay, so obstacles to success, really quickly, it's important to be honest about what those things are so you can overcome them. Founder syndrome is an organization's demise oftentimes when the person who created the organization and is leading the organization is unable to keep up with changes that are necessary in order for the organization to grow. The inability of the founding members to release some control will result ultimately in suffocation of progress. A lack of organization is also a problem. The inability to manage the business of nonprofit. One of the things that I know happens is that people who care deeply about children and about the families caring for children aren't necessarily business people, and as you're starting to raise money and grow your organization's capacity, you have to have a combination of that heart for children and that passion about the kids and the mission, combined with the ability to see it as a business and take the steps that are necessary to make it a healthy business. You've got to match the caring hearts with the business acumen. So this slide is things to watch out for, and I don't need to necessarily go through all of them. It's important to watch out for inability to prioritize, surrounding yourself only with friends rather than the people that can help you the most, and limiting the vision. And then the last thing we want to talk about, Phyllis is going to cover, are lots of great small fundraising examples.
And we talked just a short amount a minute ago about raising that money to get your nonprofit. And I'm going to go through these very quickly. And some of these have been tried and work very, very well with Together as Adoptive Parents. The first one is hold a house party. This is like a Tupperware party. If you remember the Tupperware parties, this is just like that. Get 6 to 20 guests in, have refreshments, mingle, and have your host make the ask question about your organization, about what they need, share information about the organization, maybe have even someone else, another family there to talk about what the organization has done for them, and then have the ask question of how can you help our organization. This is how you can help our organization. And that's how we get a lot of our equipment at Together as Adoptive Parents, is when we have groups like this, we say our wish list. Our wish list is to have a new printer or something like that. The next slide is on host a booth at Walmart. This is an easy one. Most all Walmarts allow you to do that. We have one every May, and we try to get the super Walmarts, because if you hit the super Walmarts, you get a lot more donations than with the smaller Walmarts. But we just stand out in front of them, and we call it blue balloons. We have a balloon for every child that have a goal of adoption in Pennsylvania. We've passed those out to families, and they give us donations. And it works very, very well. The next one is whole restaurant fundraisers, and these can be done at McDonald's. They can be done at Wendy's. Is that you pick a certain day, and they give you usually about 25% of the profit of whatever comes in that day, and that's through the drive-through as well. So you just get all your families to come and all their friends to come, and it's nice to be part of a school or have the McDonald's or the restaurant across from the school, because you can advertise at the school and you can get all the kids to come over. So that works very well. Pass out your materials, have your materials at the restaurant to do that. That's a very good fundraiser, and most all fast foods do that one. And the dessert party is similar to the Tupperware party. Ask your volunteers to make desserts. We held a thank you luncheon for our families. And one of our teen boys, he's 17 years old, he made a lot of pound cakes, and they went over so well that people were asking who made the pound cake. Well, it was the 17-year-old. Now he just made all these pound cakes and sold them for us. So dessert parties goes over very well, and that's just exactly like the Tupperware party. And you can sell tickets for that as well. Yard sale. We have done yard sales, and in one of the yard sales, we raised $1,300 at our yard sale. All of our members brought something. All of our members participated. Now, it is very labor-intense thing to do, because we had to start a couple of days before and label everything, get everything set up, and be set up by 6 o'clock in the morning. Because people start coming an hour before your time. We've done walkathon, and NACAC has a great template on walkathons. They do one every year, and we just followed what they do, and have been very successful with our walkathons. Pennies in a mall fountains. I know all of you go to the malls and you see the fountains and kids throwing pennies and nickels and quarters in there. Well, they give that money out to nonprofit organizations, and you do have to be a nonprofit, a 501c3. And in our area, they select different ones, so they don't have like 5 that they give it to all the time. You write, you ask them, you tell them your story, and perhaps they will select you to donate that money that's in the fountain. The best time is around Christmas time, because that fountain is really full. I don't know if you have a Kohl's department store, but here in Pennsylvania we have a Kohl's department store, and what they will do is they will actually send volunteers out to your event. If it's a walkathon or a yard sale, they will send 3-4 volunteers out to your event, as well as donate $500 to that event. We talked about the McDonald's night to raise funds, a 50-50 raffle. We've done that. End of year giving around that Christmas time. That is the best time, October, to get those letters out to your donors, to get the letters out to organizations, to get the letters out to families. That end of year giving also produces a lot. A wish list. I think everybody should have a wish list. Whenever we put out a newsletter, whenever we put out any type of written literature, we have a wish list on there. And usually we get some of the things donated. United Way donations. We have a donor number, and we put that United Way number on our website. We have that United Way number in our newsletter that we have. So if you're not do not have a United Way donor number, you have to be a nonprofit. Again, that's why it's important to get that 501c3. You can get money through the United Way donor funds. Corporate donation, but as we said before, that is a small amount, maybe only 12% of money 5% comes from corporations. But if you know someone that works at a corporation, that is the best way to get funding from a corporation. And sometimes they have matching. If that person that works for that corporation donate you $100, they will match it and donate $200 to your organization. We talked about personal donation and membership fees. There was and there was years that our organization did not ask for membership fees because we thought, the services that we're giving, we want all families to have it. But we have changed that for the last 2-3 years. We've been we have membership fees now, applied a membership fees to our organization, and it brings in $1,400 in membership fees. So that is another way to get that money you need to start off to become that 501c3.
So I think that concludes the show. Is there any final questions, Mary?
I don't see any. So if anyone wants to type any in there, please do. I'll just say again, in case, give people a second to ask any questions, to let everyone know. Well, first to thank Lori and Phyllis for all the incredible resources and for you all and for the attendees for sticking with us as we did go longer than planned, but it was a wealth of information. I found it fascinating. And just everyone will know, tomorrow you will get an email that will have a link to the recorded version. So if you were multitasking or doing other things, you can certainly listen to it again, and you're welcome to share it with others as well. So it looks like there are no other questions. So Lori, Phyllis, just thank you so much. And everyone, we'll add you to our email list so you'll get information about future webinars as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.